You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. And look, you know where to go if you need more online leads and deals for your real estate investing business. It's AdWordsNerds.com. Now, this week, I've got Josh Cantwell on the show. If you don't know Josh, he is an incredibly savvy real estate investor. He is someone who is not only world-class at raising money, which is something that every investor obviously needs to do. He's also made a lot of noise teaching real estate investors to bring multifamily real estate investing into their business portfolio. Josh is one of these people that is so good at expressing what he does and teaching what he does. It is really a treat to listen to him, which is probably why you may have heard him on his own podcast, the Accelerated Real Estate Investor Podcast. You can go over and check that out at acceleratedinvestorpodcast.com. So there's a million things to get to. We had a really fun time chatting, and I'm excited for you to listen to this interview with Josh Cantwell.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is Daniel Barrett, and I am here with Josh Cantwell from freelandventures.com. Josh, thank you so much for being here, man. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Dan. I enjoyed getting some time with you on our pre-call, kind of preparing for this, and look forward to sharing for sure.
Yeah, so I am, we were actually just talking before I hit the record. We were talking a little bit about what Freeland Ventures is all about. And I want you to give people an overview, if they're not familiar with you and what you do, what makes Freeland Ventures unique? Because I think among companies that are in that multifamily space, you guys you bring a lot of unique advantages to that niche. So I would love you to kind of walk people through how your business is structured and what you guys are doing today.
Sure. So we're focused 100% on B-class suburban multifamily. Large apartment complexes, anywhere from 25 to 40 units on the small end. The biggest deal I ever did was 730 units. Most of the stuff we bought is in the 200 unit range. And what makes us different is that we do everything in-house except the property management, meaning we do all of our own acquisitions, all of our own underwriting, all of our own due diligence. We raise all of our own capital. We own the construction company that does all the value add improvements. This is all we do. So we're very involved in reviewing the financials. I have a CFO that oversees all the property managers' financials. My partner, Tyler, oversees all of our property management and property managers. And my partner, Glenn, oversees all of our CapEx. So we have really 4 guys in our leadership: myself, Glenn, Tyler, and Roberto, each with a different and a unique swim lane. And that really is what we've hung our hat on, is each of us is going to be really good at one thing or 2 things. And that's allowed us to scale big time. And we've chosen B-class suburban multifamily, even C-class suburban multifamily, because when COVID hit, everybody realized they wanted to be in the suburbs. They wanted more space. But also, we have a pretty significant housing affordability problem in this country that's not going to go away. There is not solutions on the table. There's no government solutions, no political solutions, and there's really no capitalistic solutions. There's no builders out there with the cost of debt going up that are increasing the number of builds that they do. And so with the affordability being so hard right now, people are flocking to B-class suburban apartments. And so that strategy has worked really well for us for the past 6 or 7 years. So that's what we do. That's our focus.
Yeah, I love the connection you just made to like the macro trend, because I think that's really interesting. I want to touch a little bit on your business model, because I find it really interesting, right? So first thing, there's probably a relatively quick question, but you have this really fascinating vertical integration, right? Where you're handling so much of that deal structure yourselves. Mm-hmm. Why not the property management piece, right? That's the one piece you guys left out. Was that a deliberate choice? Was it just something you were interested in? Why not kind of add that to the mix?
Property management is very transactional, right? It's daily interaction. It's daily transactions with residents, paying their rent and, inputting maintenance tickets. And so you don't really make money on doing the property management. It's a lot of, let's say, unrewarding work, right? That just has to be done on decent sized apartment complexes.
Right.
What is rewarding and where you can move the needle is being kind of outside the business and slightly above the business and looking down upon the property manager and trying to find places to optimize. Because the property manager is more in the dirt, they're in the woods, to be outside of the dirt or outside of the woods and look down upon what they're doing and look at the property in a more high level way, we can suggest things what we want them to do. Here's an example. I own these two buildings. They're side by side. It's 170 units. It's Valley Park and Valley Plaza.
Okay.
Well, right next to them is another apartment complex called Brookview. Well, Brookview is what I would consider truly C-class. Like the owner's not doing anything to fix it up. The rents are low. The building looks a little bit like it's got deferred maintenance. Our two buildings are firmly B-class, and we manage them really tight. The driveways are sealed and striped. There's no trash. We have a higher level resident, and we have a more expensive rent, and we have a much higher valuation than they do.
Right.
But they're side by side. So property managers running the business, and there's people actually walking from the Brookview apartment complexes through our complex to get to some of the retail that's across the street. And then some of these idiots at Brookview are driving their car through the grass to cut through onto our property to get to the retail. The property manager's like, oh my God, these people are driving through, they're walking through.
Right.
I'm like, well, have we thought about a fence? Have we thought about some chain link? Have we thought about putting up, any kind of tree stumps or, things like this? So being there every day, leasing units out, I don't want to do that, but I do want to solve the larger problem. So that's why we're not. And secondly, Dan, I think it's a very good question in that I don't think it's fair or even possible for one company to do the property management and the heavy capital improvements. So we know that if we do the heavy capital improvements and we put together a really nice unit with a really good common space, LED lighting, LVP floors, white shaker cabinets, upgraded amenities, and we do that, we know that those units are going to rent out, right? So we'd rather attack the larger problem, which is putting together a better product. And we feel like that will then lease itself out, will create and get a better resident that, there's no problems with trash or crime or anything like that because we have better buildings and better units. So we feel like we can move the lever more by doing the capital improvements and let somebody else do the transactional property management. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think your larger point you made at the beginning, right, of saying, this is not it's obviously a critical part of the process, right? You have to have it, but it's also not where there's a lot of optimization to be had, right? Like the best version of it is not that much better than, the version just below it necessarily in terms of the impact on the bottom line. So I really like that way of thinking about it. My other question about your business model is how in the world, and this is the part of the podcast where Dan asks a selfish question. Okay. How in the world have you put together such a killer leadership team? Because this is the part that I struggle with the most. You have you were talking about your team. It's I wrote down the Avengers ? Because it sounds like the Avengers where it's like, oh, this guy's the big strong guy and that guy's the, the guy that flies and this guy's the guy that shoots lasers. So it's like you have all these people that are really great at these skill sets, right? Like the swim lanes that you're talking about. Was that, did you all come together in the beginning? Was it something where you had to build the team over time? And how do you think about that? Because I think a lot of investors struggle to build successful partnerships, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a real pain point for a lot of people, or even not even that high level, just hiring good people to work on their teams, right? So tell us a little bit about what the process was like for bringing that team together And then if you could talk a little bit more broadly about how you think about team building and leadership and that kind of stuff, I would love to hear your thoughts.
So let me take the second part first. So the way I think about the business period is I have an infinite mindset as far as time goes. I used to flip houses and I was very much worried about how much money we were going to make today.
Yeah.
How much money we're going to make right now, how much money we're going to make in the next quarter. And that's all I cared about. It was very short term. It was very transactional. When I got into multifamily, I started thinking about, do I want to own this asset forever? I stopped thinking about flipping altogether and I started thinking about the infinite game. Early on in my career, this mindset really started because I ran into this owner. His name was Turk. Turk was an immigrant. He was about 85 to 90 years old. I was looking at one of his apartment buildings to buy. He pulled up in this beautiful Cadillac. He got out. He got right into this kick-ass, like $20,000 golf cart. And then his property manager / assistant drove him around the complex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to be like Turk. This is like 6-7 years ago. And then I found out Turk had 950 units, all paid off. And I'm like, he had like $100 million portfolio, all paid off. I'm like, I want to be like that guy.
Yeah.
And I realized, first of all, I noticed his age. He didn't do this overnight, but he did it in his lifetime.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. Turned out the girl that picked him up on the golf cart was his granddaughter that worked in the business. So I'm like, well, she's gonna benefit from him having this long-term mindset. So I started looking at my staff, my employees in the same way. I said, first of all, I'm not going to hire somebody and expect them to change the world in the first 30 days, the first 60 days, even the first 6 months. About 10 years ago, I started telling myself, I'm going to evaluate new employees after 1 year. I'm going to hire them. I'm going to be slow to hire. I'm going to make sure that we hold them accountable.
Damn.
But I really don't think they can have a massive impact on your business, any business, until they really have been there a year. Then they know the software that you're using. They know the other people on the team. They know other people's personalities. They know how they can play in the culture. They know what their role is. They know how they can move the needle. They can take accountability. I think part of the problem is, as owners and CEOs and leaders, we just have a very short-term, immediate expectation of new people. So Roberto, my CFO, has been with me 15 years. Roberto, actually, I found him 15 years ago from a temp agency. He had moved from New Jersey, New York to Cleveland, was brand new to the area, looking for something new in finance and accounting, and he threw his hat in with a temp agency. We needed financial help. We brought him in, and we've nurtured him 15 years. And he's now become our CFO, and he's involved in everything we do. I own 35 different LLCs, and he knows a lot about my personal finances as well.
Yeah.
There's been many times Roberto and I have butted heads, got into fights, but we've always come back to, is he the right fit long term?
Yeah.
And the answer was always yes. Secondly, my business partner, Glenn, and I went to college together. He was in the Fortune 500 world. He was in fiber and telecom and had been moved all over the country. He'd been moved like 15 times. Finally, he called me up one day and said, hey, bro, I'm actually getting a divorce. I'm moving back to Cleveland. And he and I had stayed in touch. We've been very close friends, but never did any business together. And once his divorce was final, I'm like, okay, I knew he was a guy that had a lot of corporate Fortune 500 experience that could help me put together the swim lanes, put together the standard operating procedures, put together the stuff that I was not great at. And so we became a great fit. Then the third part of it was Tyler. I used to own and run a private equity fund. We had about $40 million under management. We were doing a lot of private lending and hard money lending out of the fund. And Tyler, we hired him away from Quicken Loans to become our vice president of basically acquisition, where he was basically acquiring customers. Well, when we decided to wind that down and move into apartments, I knew that Tyler had a lot of experience with his own property management, with his own portfolio, with managing loans, with managing customers. I knew he would be really good at acquiring buildings and overseeing property managers, right? Because he had already done it for his own portfolio. So each one of these Avengers, these superheroes, came together One, because as a CEO, I have to be very aware of what swim lanes I need. And I have to be very aware as I'm networking, as I'm talking with people, as I'm evaluating in-house talent versus out-of-house talent. I've constantly got to be looking for those exact things that I need. And so when Glenn said, hey, I'm getting divorced and moving back, I knew what he had already been up to and what he was really good at. So I knew he'd be a fit. So we started a business together right away. Roberto was already good at finance and accounting, never had an experience with multifamily. He's just grown up in the business with us as we move from resi to multifamily. Yeah. And finally, Tyler, he's a little younger than me. He's like in his early 30s. He's younger. He's willing to hustle. He's willing to look for deals. And that property management experience was big. So now I can tell you, Dan, leading up to that, I've also had numerous other partnerships that did not work. And I also knew what I didn't want in partners, right? I need people who are highly organized, people who are thinking 6 months to 2 years to 5 years out, and people that are willing to document everything. We tell our people, Dan, last point I'll make on this is we tell our staff, if it's not in the software or if it's not written down in Google Docs, we use Google Docs for a lot, and we use software systems. If it's not in the software, it didn't freaking happen.
Yeah.
And so our team the culture has been built around, don't text me or email me a conversation or a decision or a problem. It's got to go in the software so everybody can see it. So it's date stamped, it's time stamped. You can upload all the documents that support that problem so we can solve it together. We can collaborate on it. I hate email. One of the things my company thrives on is we do not email each other. Everything goes into software.
Yeah.
And so it not only is it me paying attention to what we need, but it's identifying, what swim lanes do we have to scale? And then third, I think it's having a long-term infinite mindset. And fourth, it's in the micro, it's about if it's not in the software, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Those are the things that have allowed us to be really effective.
I think I want to point out, right? And I think that's such a cool philosophy. And I think it makes a lot of sense, right? But I want to point out that like in many ways, like what most people will say is, like you said, hire slow, but also fire fast, right? So the idea is like, hey, if someone comes in and they're not doing well in that first month, get them out and get someone else in, right? But what you're saying is like,
what kind of training have you given them?
Yeah.
That's the caveat, right? So I, as a small business owner, we've got a large portfolio, but I really only have like 12 people on my full-time payroll. And then I've got contractors, subcontractors, property managers that are all, 1099. But I would say, people say hire slow and fire fast. Yes, but only if you've provided them significant amount of training and then they failed. The problem with small business owners and entrepreneurs is that they bring somebody in and they think that person is just going to solve problems with little or no training, because as a small business owner, you don't have time to train them. You're too freaking busy as a CEO. You don't have any training systems. You're not a Fortune 500 company. So you haven't trained them. That's the immature mistake that I used to make.
Yeah.
I'd bring somebody in. I thought they were a Superman. I'm like, just by hiring them, it's going to solve all my problems. And that never happened. And then I looked back, I'm like, oh my God, my training sucks. I'm awful at it.
Yeah.
No wonder why they're failing. So instead of, I realize now what I'm good at and what I'm not good at is my training still sucks. But I take a long term to give them more bandwidth, more rope, to give them more time and space to learn everything we're going to learn, but maybe over 6 to 12 months instead of 30 to 90 days. That's the difference, because I know what I'm good at and what I'm not.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a really good reminder for me as someone who was also very bad at training and oftentimes not great at even explaining how exactly it is. I always joke that like all my SOPs end with, like step number 15 is, if the above fails, just rely on your 10 years of experience, right? Like it's always like the last part of it, because I'm like, So, all right. So let's go back and talk a little bit. We've talked about Freeland Ventures. Again, you can go check out everything that Josh is doing over at freelandventures.com and go check that out. Really cool site. We've got a bunch of stuff. We haven't even touched on a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing over there. But I want to talk a little bit about your pathway into real estate, right? So how exactly did you get to where you are now? You've had this sort of pathway that's taken you through you mentioned sort of flipping and wholesaling, right? You went in through the sort of online marketing space. So give people a little bit of your backstory. Like, how'd you get to where you guys are today?
Sure. So super long, short, I got out of college and got right into financial advising. And I think that's important to recognize, Dan, because when I was a financial planner at 22, 24, 25 years old, I had my Series 6 license, life and health, Series 6, 66. I was writing financial plans for people that were 3 times my age.
Right.
I got very comfortable talking to people about money and about their goals and fact-finding appointments and the stock market going up and down. But what I realized was that most of my successful clients did not have all their money in the stock market. They actually owned real estate. They owned portfolios, rental portfolios. They owned apartment buildings. They owned restaurants. They didn't run the restaurant. They actually owned the physical structure and leased it to a restaurant. So I took notice, man. And I bought my first investment property when I was 24 years old.
Wow.
I bought a duplex that I moved into and I house hacked it. I lived in half. I rented out the other side of the duplex. I rented out one of the rooms on my side of the duplex to my buddy. And I lived there for $100 a month. Otherwise would have cost me $1,000 a month. I lived there for $100 a month. So, but that's important because I think if you're going to be in real estate and do anything at scale, right? You're going to buy 100 rental units, 100 single family homes, or you're going to buy a 200 unit apartment building, or you're going to buy 4,000 units like we have. You have to be very comfortable talking to investors about their money. So I got comfortable with that very young. Then I got sick of financial planning. I got sick of the regulation and the late work, during the week and weekends, meeting with clients. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to start going to these, weekend boot camps and things. And I did. And I realized this was back in 2004 that when I got home, we were very interested in foreclosure investing, distressed assets. We were very interested in short sales and pre-foreclosures. And I realized that Cleveland, where I'm from, already had a major foreclosure problem. There were like 10 publicly traded companies that had folded, collapsed, went bankrupt, or had been merged between 2001 and 2005. And so lots of jobs were lost. People left town. And there was a glut. There was an oversupply of houses. And there were a lot of people in foreclosure. So we decided we were just going to get really good at doing pre-foreclosures and short sales. By that, Dan, we actually kind of got lucky because then when the crisis hit in 2008, we were already 3 years ahead of the game, negotiating short sales, pre-foreclosures. So we started doing these massive seminars, teaching people. I was probably doing 10 to 15 seminars a year, over one a month. And we would have rooms of 50 people to 500 people coming to learn about pre-foreclosure investing because that's where the market went in 2008, 9, 10.
Yeah.
But what happened, Dan, is we got really good at that. We did nearly 1,000 pre-foreclosure deals, wholesale deals, short sales, all flipping, very transactional. But again, life gets in the way. In 2011, I got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 35 years old, 2 kids. Wife is 8 months pregnant with our third.
Wow.
And I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which had at that time just a 6% survival rate. 6%.
Wow, man.
And I thought, holy crap. Like, I learned all about real estate, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and multiple streams of income, Robert Allen, and all these weekend seminars, and Dolph DeRoos, and all these things I went to. But I didn't really own a portfolio. I was just very transactional and flipping, wholesaling, rehabs, things like that. And now all of a sudden, I got ripped away from work for 9 months. Well, if you're recovering from major pancreatic cancer surgery, you have a newborn at home. I had a newborn now at home and 3 little kids. My wife had an emergency C-section, so she had a surgery of her own.
Yeah.
And now I have no money coming in. Like, this is a major, major problem.
Oh my God. It sounds like the most anxiety-inducing, like, combination of things you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, but now imagine, now fast forward to today, and it's a different problem, but with interest rates skyrocketing and mortgage applications falling and prices starting to stagnate and not as many buyers, a lot of people that were just rehab flipping, or wholesaling and trying to find somebody that was just willing to pay more. They were basically paying 95 cents on the dollar for a wholesale deal and wholesaling it to somebody else for 100 cents on the dollar, or even 105 cents on the dollar, because prices are going up because there's no supply because of COVID. Like, that wasn't a business. That was not a business. That was basically taking advantage of the market. That's being an entrepreneur. I get it. You're making money based on what's going on in that vacuum, that time, that moment in real estate, but that's not a long-term infinite mind. That's not a long-term infinite investing, which is what we do. And so the lesson that a lot of people are learning today about the troubles with flipping, the trouble with being transactional, I learned that lesson in 2011 because of cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what we decided to do, long short, is I knew coming out of that surgery that recruiting capital and doing more commercial investments was the key, but I had no experience in commercial real estate. I had a lot of experience in resi. So what we decided to do was start up this private equity fund, recruit capital into a fund using a PPM, and we were lending it out. And those loans created passive income. Okay. But a lot of those loans were a year or two long, or even 6 months. And that became, even though it was a little longer term and it was creating passive income, every time a loan paid off, I was like, crap, I've got to go make a new loan.
Yeah. You got to replace it now.
A little bit, right? So finally in 2016, 17, we were already underwriting and funding as a lender, as a debt lender. We were already funding apartment buildings. And then I started investing in buying them, started investing equity in other people's apartment buildings. And then we got to the point where we shut the fund down in order to just be the GP in all of our own apartment deals. And we've been doing that now for many, many years. And so it's definitely been an evolution, Dan. I think it's all about paying attention. And like Joseph McClendon, right, who's the partner of Tony Robbins, says there's no such thing as winners and losers, right? There's only winners and learners. And so I've learned, there's many points in my life, in my career, Dan, where I could have thought, like, I'm a freaking loser. I had cancer. I didn't make any money for 9 months. Then I made a bunch of loans. Then COVID hit. There's all these circumstances where I could have been a loser, but I learned, I paid attention, and it constantly kept making pivots. And ultimately, I fell into this business of multifamily and large apartment buildings where I feel like it's an infinite business. I can own these buildings forever. I can be like Turk, right? I can be the Turk of my own family, my own generation, which is exactly what we've done. So I would just encourage all of your listeners, look, if you're having success in resi, you're doing really well, you should still be looking at creating long-term passive income through apartments. If you're struggling and you're flipping and that business is drying up, pivot to multifamily and apartment buildings as soon as possible. I've learned those lessons already, and that's what I would submit to them that they should start doing now.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful message. And I think even to someone like me, right, who's like, I work with investors, but I am not yet actually invested in real estate, right? Like I'm focused on being really great at what I do. But this idea of there are certain businesses that are inherently transactional, right? Even if you are the best in the world at it, right? They are constantly needing to be replenished or replaced. I think contrasting this with this idea of like this sort of infinite game model that you mentioned, where it's like, this is a thin asset you're going to own forever. I think that's really, really powerful mental models.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed part 1 of this episode. It's just too good to limit to one show. Join us next week to hear the rest.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.